Hello, everyone. Am I audible, guys? Uh, can anyone put in a message? Am I audible, guys? Guys. Okay, chalo, guys. Let's start with the analysis of IIM Bangalore DBE program. The test was conducted today. The timing of the test was from 2 to 3:30. The timing of the test was from 2 to 3:30. Let's look at first the exam writing experience. The test was conducted at various centers. I talked with a few students, and they told me that the registration process was quite simple and very easy. They just took the thumb impression and took one photograph as usual, and it went on very smoothly. There were not many. There were many counters in the hall, so there was no line as such for doing the registration process. Okay. During the test, the rough sheet was available to us, and the test went on smoothly. So the students that I talked with said that they did not see any students who found any difficulty, or the computer lagged, or there was a shutdown, nothing like that. So even technical aspect of the test was very, very smooth. Okay. Students were supposed to get their own pen. So out of all the things that the students could carry, it was only a pen and one photo ID that was needed for the test. So let's look at the test pattern first. Nothing surprising at all. It was very, very similar. It was exactly the same as that happened in the previous years. Four sections: verbal ability, quantitative ability, logical reasoning, and GK. VA had 20 questions, QA had 20 questions, Logic had 10 questions, and GK had 10 questions. So you had a total of 60 questions, and the time limit of the test was 90 minutes. There was no sectional time limit as such. There were tabs for every section. Okay, so you had all the 20 questions of verbal in one tab, all the 20 questions of quant in one tab, and so on. There were tabs for the sections, but you could easily move in from any section to any section whenever you want to. There was no sectional time limit at all. It was mentioned that each question carried 1 mark. Okay, the test interface was also exactly very similar to what you have been seeing over the years from the time the DBE started. Okay, another important thing, the on-screen calculator was available for the students. Okay, so there were questions wherein the calculator was used, because I asked the students, did they use the calculator? They said yes. In quantitative ability, there was a DI set in which they felt that using the calculator helped because it was calculation oriented. So yes, the on-screen calculator was available to the students. Now, if I look at the level of difficulty of each section, if you look at verbal ability, it was easy to moderate level. You look at quantitative ability, it was also easy to moderate. You look at logical reasoning, it was the easiest of all the sections. That's what the students told me. And if you look at GK, it was a little moderate this year. Students found it a little difficult. Many students told me that, the topics were very weird. They were asking on government policies and infrastructure. AI was a couple of questions on AI, as expected. So but if you have been reading your newspapers daily, students still felt that there were not many questions that they had seen earlier, or something like that, or topics that they were familiar. So hence the students found the GK section to be a little difficult. Okay, so we will look at each and every section individually. So let's look at the verbal ability section first. So as I said, the level of difficulty was easy to moderate. Okay, This was the bifurcation of the 20 questions of verbal ability. There was one RC passage, number of questions four. It was some medical based passage. Okay. There were five fill in the blanks in the question, in the section. Out of the five fill in the blanks, students told me there was one question which had three blanks, and approximately two questions which had two blanks, and two questions which had one blank. And most of them were, grammar based itself. There was one idiom in the set. There were three more grammar based questions. There was one question on antonym and one question on synonym. The antonym question was basically match the following. That means there were four words given. You need to match the antonym of those four words. Okay. uh, Students said that if there was one word, if you would have cracked that, then I think you could have easily worked with the options in that match the following also. There was one para completion question. Sorry, in fact, there were two para completion questions. There was one analogy questions, and there was two odd one out questions. Okay. Now, why did the students say that, the section was a little moderate? Because the antonym synonym questions, the words, they said they were not very familiar with, because of which they felt that the verbal ability section was on a little difficult side. Grammar, idiom, phrases, rest all they said were very easy. Reading comprehension, they said it should be around 350 words passage. Maybe there was one question on summary based, one question on inference in that RC. So, that couple of questions maybe in RCs also, a couple of students told me that they found it a little challenging because of the options. Okay. And just because of the antonym synonym, many students felt that the section was on a little difficult side. Okay. So let's look at the next section, which is the cont section. The cont section was also easy to moderate. Many students felt just that couple of questions were difficult, and they also said that there were three or four questions which were very time consuming. In fact, there was one APGP question. You had to form that APGP. Okay, the APGP AGP series. I'm not saying APGP AGP series. Uh, the AGP series was not given. You had to identify that AGP question and then solve that AGP. Hence, that made it a little calculation oriented. Many students found out that to be, a little difficult also. So that was one question which students said that there was time consuming. In DI, there was a set of four questions. There was a bar and a line graph, two given. It was based on the number of cars manufactured during the year, 5-year data given, and number of cars exported was also given. Okay. Students said that the first two questions were quite calculative oriented. Okay, the remaining two questions were very straightforward and easy. But two questions out of that four in DI, students said that we had to use the calci because the numbers were a little bigger numbers and not easy numbers also. So they felt that using the calculator helped them. Okay, so there were questions which were calculation oriented. So if I go through those 20 questions given, algebraic formula is one question you got, an algebraic formula. There was one question on compound interest, percentage, allegation. There was one question on cyclic quadrilateral, which student found it difficult or time consuming. Many students said it was not difficult, but it was time consuming. Okay. And one student told me that if you would have worked with options, maybe it would have been a little easier. Then there was a question on mensuration, which was very easy. Then there was a question on area under the curve, which many students, in fact, told me that they just left that question because they were not getting the region itself. There was one question which I think was based on regular hexagon, if I remember, and it also had a rhombus or something along with it. So hexagon rhombus combination. There was one question on linear equation. There was one question on quadratic equation, application of quadratic equation actually. Okay, there was one question on remainder theorem for polynomials, one on upstream, downstream, one on pipes and systems. So there were, in fact, one question on AGP, which I said, and there was one question on AP also. There was one question on permutation combination, which again student found it a little difficult on PNC. You had to rank one word that they had given. I think manager, if I'm not mistaken, the rank of the word manager is what you had to find. And the DI set, as I said, two were easy, two were on a little calculation oriented. So hence, on an average, the student found this section to be easy to moderate. So however, talking with the students, what I felt was, it was more of calculation oriented rather than just a couple of questions which were difficult. But remember guys, you have 60 questions, 90 minutes. That means you have roughly 1.5 minutes per question. So you should expect questions to be a little lengthy or little calculation oriented. Okay. Again, let's move on to the next section. It is the logical reasoning section. Very easy. Students said it was simply, there was nothing, very small passages. So say for example, there was one linear arrangement question, one circular arrangement, one matrix. By the time you read it, the data was ready with us. There was one question on directions, one on calendar, which was a little time consuming. That's what they said. Symbol based family tree, symbol based BODMAS, series completion, odd one out. Series completion was on numbers based, very simple. I think what they said was it was a difference of 3 6 9 12 something. Odd one out was based on alphabets basically. And there was only one question on verbal reasoning, which is, if I remember, I think it was conclusion statement was given, two conclusions were given, and you had to find out which conclusion is true out of that. So student felt that this was the easiest of all the questions here, or all the sections here. We Let's move on to the last section, which is GK. As I said earlier, right in the beginning, the GK section, there were around 5 to 6 questions on static GK and roughly 4 to 5 questions on current affair also. So roughly a 50-50 distribution of static and current affairs. Okay, so there was lots and lots of questions students said, which is based on government policies, infrastructure, a couple of questions on AI, and so on. However, if you are reading a newspaper on a daily basis, a couple of students said that it was okay type of a question, or okay type of a section. Okay, so this is the brief description about each and individual section of the test. So if I look at the overall analysis, the test was easy to moderate, I would suggest. It is more of test of accuracy rather than a test of speed, because as I said, you have only 60 questions and 90 minutes to solve those 60 questions. Hence, you're not going to be challenged against time. What you're going to be challenged is against accuracy. If you spend that extra time, I'm sure you would have got the answer to those questions. Okay. And a good attempt a good attempt is what I would suggest is 45 questions plus. If you have attempted more than 45 questions, I think you have done a good job in this test. So considering a 90 percentile, I think a good score would be around 40 plus. Normally a score of 30 plus is what I have observed that students get a call, but in this case a good score would be around, I think, around 40. If you score around 40, I think you should get a call for this test. So this was the analysis of the test. If you have any questions, I am looking at the chat. If you have any questions, please put it down on the chat. Okay, so I don't see any questions coming up. So all the best for your results. Thank you guys.